So before I get into our lesson today, we have 3 minutes scheduled for homework check-in. So those of you who aren't in here, this class has homework. This is a practical subject. We're not just here to learn, we're here to practice. And here's the homework throughout the class, is that you would pray daily for an unbeliever or opportunities, but pray daily for an unbeliever. Try to meet weekly with unbelievers. That can be playing pickleball and grabbing dinner afterwards. Some of you, this step's really easy. Some of you, this step's really hard. But in order to witness, you need to be around unbelievers. Find a way to do that. We talked about that last week. So pray daily, meet weekly, and share monthly. If we all had the commitment to share the gospel on a monthly basis, our church would be sharing 6 times the national average. So for a lot of us who might go years without sharing 6 times or sharing 12 times in a year is huge growth. And so for us, our commitment is that by the end of this 6-week class, every single one of us will have shared the gospel. All right? So pray daily, meet weekly, share monthly. Every single week, we're going to give you guys 3 minutes to share with your table how you're doing on these 3 things. So that 3 minutes is going to start right now. One minute to wrap things up. 1 minute. All right. Well, very good. Every week we'll give you those 3 minutes to hold each other accountable at your table to hear how things are going. I would just like a show of hands if anyone was able to share the gospel in the last week. Can I see hands? Okay, several of you are able to. Is there anyone who's able to very briefly share what happened? You can just shout it out. Yeah, go ahead.
Like I was telling them, I don't have a car, so I get around by Uber and Lyft and the bus. And they're one of my biggest mission fields. Especially the drivers. Because I tell them how good God has been to me, and it opens the door. And I'm always asking them, do you know the Lord? And it's always, and this last time, he didn't believe in hell, he was just majorly confused. But it opens the door for me to minister what I know of the gospel.
I love it. I love it. So remind me your name again.
Alice.
So Alice said she rides the bus, Uber, and Lyft. That's how she gets around. And she said that she has great opportunities to share with her drivers. And so she was able to share this last week. And so praise God for that. But yeah, every single week. So that was like 7 or 8 hands that went up. I'd love to see that every week, that happening, you guys being faithful. And we won't even have the time to hear everyone's stories, but you could share briefly with your tables, and we want to really celebrate being faithful in evangelism here. So here in this class, last week, a quick recap, we talked about evangelism freedom last week. How, honestly, freeing you as an evangelist is one of the main purposes of this class. And so last week we talked about being freed from guilt in evangelism, free from fear in evangelism, free from distraction in evangelism, and then it's very poetic, but the freedom to fly in your evangelism. And so we're giving you biblical and practical training to do that. And so we want to practically help you get the conversation started. That's where a lot of us struggle. And to keep it going and to help give you opportunities to share the gospel in that moment or in the future. And so the main tactic we're going to become experts with in this class is called the Columbo Tactic, which is named, of course, after this guy. And so we talked a bit about him last week, but essentially this was a famous detective show that was unlike modern shows. It wasn't as much about DNA or shooting guns and action, that sort of thing. It was all about his interactions with the suspects and him finding out who's lying and who's telling the truth and what's going on. And he comes across very, very harmless and very inquisitive. But what happens is people end up revealing so much that he can find out the truth just by asking questions. And so the Columbo tactic essentially boils down to the power of questions. So we actually like to call them Columbo questions. So that's an easy thing to remember. If you don't know what to say, think of Columbo questions. There's a lot of benefits we covered last week. One of the biggest ones being opening a conversation naturally. We talked about the 10-second rule, not about food, but about a conversation. Someone says something, you're like, I'm a Christian, I should say something. 10 seconds go by, and now it's totally awkward, and you don't know how to get back to it. But this helps you open the conversation, direct the conversation without being pushy, learn about the person. It's going to lower their walls by showing how much you care. You're gaining time for yourself to think, and you're earning the right to speak. So there's so many wonderful benefits to asking good questions. So when we're talking about this, the author, Greg Kokel, in his book, he gives us 3 main uses for Columbo questions. And we're going to learn about the first 2 today. So the first 2 uses of Columbo questions. And so when we get to these, you're going to be like, wow, this is really simple. This is really straightforward. And that's the point. If something's simple, we want it to be simple so that we can actually do it. And here's the first one. The first one, we ask questions to gather information. So you ask questions to gather information. And I want to encourage you, do not skip this step. I think so many conversations can go completely differently if someone would take the time to gather information. A lot of times we hear something, and some of us, we just want to argue. We're ready to argue with someone. Don't rush into it. Gather some information. Some of us, we don't know what to say, and so we let it pass. Don't let the time pass. Gather information. So take your time. Ask questions. So he gives an author, Greg Kokel gives an example, how one time he was talking to a guy in an airplane, and he brings up how he's a Christian, and the guy says, well, I'm not a Christian, and none of my friends are, right? And sometimes you'd be like, well, you should, you just want to get right into it. But he decided to ask some more questions, and he found out asking that questions, the guy said that he used to be a Christian, but he's not anymore. Oh, weren't you glad you asked another question? And then he keeps asking questions, and he finds out not only did he not used to be a Christian, but he said this. He said, in fact, I used to be a preacher's kid. And it's like, oh, wow. But he still didn't get right into it. He's like, that's interesting how he worded that. I used to be a preacher's kid. So he said, so you used to be, are you not now? How did that work? And he said, well, my dad was a preacher, but now he's not a preacher. In fact, he's not even a Christian anymore. Oh, well, he's like, aren't you? He's like, I was so glad that I asked questions, because this is a very different scenario now that I know this guy's story a little bit more, right? And so gathering information was so critical for him. So I want to talk about some questions you can ask to gather information. Here is Greg's favorite question. And there's some space in your notes. You can write this down if you want, anything that you think is a good idea. But here's his number one question. His one question is, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? And you might think, oh, that seems simple. That's the point. It's a simple question, right? And so you can do this with all kinds of things. So someone brings up how they believe in evolution. We all evolved. We all evolved, every single creature. We have a common ancestor, right? And you're like, oh, where do I go with this? You're not sure what to say? Just ask, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by evolution? What does evolution mean to you, right? You ask a clarifying question. Another example. Someone says, I just can't believe in God with all the evil in the world. Oh, man, I feel stumped. How do I go with this conversation? We can just ask them, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by evil? How come God couldn't exist if there's evil? Can you explain this to me? Just ask them a question and let them answer. Another one on the subject of abortion. Someone might say, well, abortion's fine because a fetus isn't a person, so it doesn't matter. Oh, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by it's not a person? Can you explain this for me? So you just ask a clarifying question, and that invites them to talk and share their view and listen, and you'll learn about their belief and you'll learn about them. So you're asking clarifying questions. A similar question you can say, can you clarify this for me? Or say, oh, how does that work? How does that work that with evil in the world, God can't exist? Can you explain that? So these are a really great way to ask a first question. Now here's my favorite question. My favorite question are when questions. I like asking when questions. I'll say, oh, when did you start believing that way? Or when did you become a blank, whatever it is? So the reason why I like asking when questions is because it invites them to tell me a story, right? And I found that's incredibly disarming, because if we're just talking about ideas, so if someone says, I'm an atheist, I'm like, I'm a Christian, and then we're just like arguing about ideas, we're arguing over abstract concepts, which is fine sometimes. But if I ask them, when did you become an atheist, right? Now they're just telling me a story. They're telling me about their personal life. And now it's not us arguing about concepts, but it's two people sharing their stories, right? It's a more personal conversation. And so I gave this example last week. I had done some information gathering. I was at a t-shirt shop, and it was a Saturday, and I was talking to this young guy working there, and turns out his family owns it. I said, oh, so your family makes you run the shop on Saturdays? And he's like, well, yeah, they're at synagogue, right? And they're Jews. And at first I thought, okay, this guy's a Jew. What's all the Jewish stuff I need to know? But I decided to ask him some more questions. I thought, wait, so your parents are at synagogue and you're not. How come that is? And he said, well, that's because I'm a Buddhist. And so I shared that story last week, and I gained some very important information. But the next question I asked him, I didn't tell you this last week, I asked him a when question. I said, when did you become a Buddhist? You grew up a Jew. When did you become a Buddhist? It's an interesting question, right? And he told me, he's like, I went to college, and I had this world religions class, and the teacher was really inspiring. We talked about Buddhism, just made a lot of sense to me. And so I became a Buddhist. And that was the story he told me about. Oh, and from there I could ask, I was like, so what does being a Buddhist mean to you? What does that look like? From there I had much better questions to ask, gaining information. But hearing that story was really helpful. Another kind of information gathering question, I like to use, especially when you can tell someone's passionate, maybe even a little bit heated, okay? I like to it's okay, you kind of point out what's happening in the conversation. So someone's really passionate about something, you can tell they're really intense about it, they're really into this, and I just say, wow, like, what makes you so passionate about this? I'll say, I can sense a lot of passion in your voice. Why does this matter to you so much? And a lot of times, they'll tell you a story. And you get to learn about them. You get to learn about why they hold the view that they have. I had a friend, he was a campus minister, and he was doing evangelism, talking to students, and this one guy was just really angry and just really belligerent and going from one thing to another, and he's trying to talk to him, trying to have a good conversation. This guy was just upset, and that happens. That happens. We talked about that last week. And seeing that there's something very, very wrong going on here, he slowed down and he asked the guy, he's like, I can tell you're really upset about Christianity. He's like, what happened? And the guy said, I don't want to talk about that. And then he left and walked away. He's like, oh, okay, there was a that, right? And so even with that, even though he didn't get somewhere good in the conversation, he knew we probably weren't going to. This guy wanted to fight, and that was that. But asking questions allows you to gain information and helps you to assess what's really going on in the situation. So that's the first use of the Columbo Tactic, is gathering information. Now, here's the second use. The second use is reversing the burden of proof. This is really valuable. There's something in our culture where it's always the Christians who have to be on the defensive. Everyone expects, think Christians are in the weaker position. You got to defend yourself. We should be critical of you. But a lot of times, people just believe things or say things, and they've not thought about it 1 ounce. And so it's worth sometimes asking a question to reverse the burden of proof. So sometimes people strongly state an opinion, or they'll just say a slogan at you, and they assume it's your job to argue against them. And a lot of times they're even baiting you. They're baiting you, contradict what I just said. But a lot of times you don't even have to, at least not right away. Ask them for reasons or evidence to back up their claim. So here's how Greg puts it. Here's the general question he likes to ask in this use. He says, how did you come to that conclusion? How did you come to that conclusion? A way I like to say it, I like to just say, oh, what makes you say that? What makes you say that? They say something, and I'll say, what makes you say that? Here's an example. So one of the most common things I heard, I had done Q&A on public Q&A at a state university for every week for 8 years. And a common thing I'd hear people say, well, the Bible's just changed over time. People say that. You've probably heard that. People say that all the time. And what you're tempted to go is right into, well, it hasn't, and here's the reasons why, and this and that. But sometimes it's worth just asking, what makes you say that? What makes you say the Bible's changed over time? lot of times people they don't have anything else to say, but they might go on, they say, well, it's not the same as it was. It's changed. It's not the same as the original. And you say, can you give me an example? Give me an example of how it's changed. And don't sound rude about it. Say, I'd like to hear an example. And here's one I've heard a lot. When people give me an example, here's what I usually hear. They'll say, well, it changed with Constantine. Yeah, Constantine changed the Bible. You hear, it's always Constantine's fault. And so from there, you can argue, or you can just ask another question. Oh, well, what kind of things did Constantine change? And a lot of times, they have no idea. And the reason why is because he didn't. In reality, many people, they won't have a response for your question, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. It shows how they just said something accusing your beliefs or made a strong statement, but you just revealed something to them. They don't even know why they believe it. They just believe it. And sometimes people just repeat themselves. They'll say, like I said, the Bible's changed over time. Well, what makes you think that? They say, well, because it's different than it was, right? They'll just repeat themselves. And then from there, you're like, okay, well, we said that, but give me an example. That's a great follow-up question for that. A lot of times, people just change directions completely. This is actually what happens most often, maybe. They'll say, oh, the Bible's changed. I'll say, oh, really? Can you give me an example of that? People kind of get stuck in like, and Christians were terrible in the Crusades. The Crusades come up a lot. I've heard about that a lot. I say, okay, I'm really interested to hear about that too, but you said that the Bible's changed over time, and then when I asked you, for example, you brought up the Crusades. Could you give me an example about how the Bible changed? A lot of times they don't have one, right? And you will kind of are reversing the burden of proof and revealing to them how much they know or don't know about what they're talking about. Because people tend to have very strong convictions. They'll say things very boldly, but you're just asking them, hey, show me your evidence. Show me your reasons. And so I was in a debate once at the university. Don't look it up. I did a terrible job. I'll probably never do it again. But one of the best parts was actually the Q&A. And so this atheist speaker, he had a big problem with God and the problem of evil, and he would say the God of the Bible is an evil God for creating the world in the way it is. And student after student asked the same question. I'd really like to ask a question. So you're an atheist. What do you think is evil? Or what is evil based on? And then question after question, they kept asking him this question, and he was getting flustered about how they weren't buying his answers, and he never really could convince anyone of what he was saying. And it was amazing that no one even had to argue anything with him. They're just asking him the question, well, how do you know what evil is? And he just didn't have any good answers. No one in the room was convinced. Even the atheist club in the room was looking worried because their guy was sweating up there. And so that was the best part. I didn't have to say anything. I just let him squirm. So, by the way, him and I were very friendly with each other. No hard feelings against him, but that's what happened. So when we ask these questions, we're reversing the burden of proof. Here's what we're accomplishing. We're not yet sharing the gospel, but we're doing some good things. One, we're doing what Greg Kokel calls, we're putting a stone in their shoe. We're giving something to bug them. They're like, this thing that I just believed, it just seemed to be true. Now this is annoying because it's not everything I thought it was. You're making them question the lie they were so sure of. And you might be helping them to hear the truth. They were so sure before, but now you're in a better position to give your answer by pointing out the problems in their belief. And so this asking these questions to gather information, reverse the burden of proof, these are really valuable tools to prime this conversation for gospel sharing. Now, in future weeks, we're going to take more steps, but this is a practical class. We're going to practice what we've learned right now. So, we're going to have handed out to you guys some props. Oh, look at these wonderful people. They're all handing out the props to you. I need from each table, I told you this, I made this promise. No one has to do this who doesn't want to. So I need a volunteer who would like to play the character of an unbeliever. And if that's you, you get the clipboard, okay? And every table needs somebody if you want to play the character of an unbeliever. So I need one unbeliever, and I need one believer at every table, all right? One unbeliever and one believer at every table. Okay, we're doing it. Yeah, it's confidential. All right, if everyone has your thing, you have your unbeliever, open up the envelope and pull out the card there. Pull out the letter. And I actually need to borrow somebody's because I need to read the top. All right, can I borrow yours, Luke? Sure. Thanks. All right, so for the unbeliever, I'll read this out loud for you. Here's the scenario. You are on a sidewalk corner at the town center shopping area, asking for signatures to petition to legalize recreational cannabis in the state of Florida. This is the scenario. And the believer, this person's approaching you, asking you for a signature. So I need the unbeliever and I need one believer. All right, so let's give the unbeliever a minute to become their character, to get in character. They need to read the notes there. But the rest of you, I want you to pay attention. All right, the rest of you, I want you to pay attention to me. So you're going to have your Christian. You as the Christian, it's your job to engage with this person for about 8 minutes, okay? It's your job to start a conversation with them and keep it going. And now the rest of you at the table, you might think you're doing nothing, but really pay attention, because here's why. Even if it's not you, you're going to hear things you might think, wow, that was really good. Write it down, okay? It was really good, write it down. Or you might think, this person is doing terrible. Some of you are going to do terrible. It's okay. That's why we're here. And you can think, but how could we do better? All right? So, I'm going to give like 30 seconds for the person with the card to get in character. In your instructions there, you're instructed what to do with your props. So once I start seeing the sunglasses on the hair, I'll know that you've gotten in character. The unbeliever. Yeah. Yeah. All right, I want to see those sunglasses. Here we go. And it doesn't have to be on your face. It can be in your hair. A little more approachable that way. Just the unbeliever only. It's confidential. Yeah. The notes are confidential. Only the unbeliever. Yeah. You can't tell the rest of the table. The unbeliever. Only the unbeliever can read it. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's your prop. Goes on your head. There you go. All right, so if you're ready, go ahead and get started. If you're ready, get started with your table. All right. We'll wrap it up right there. Okay. Well, I think this is really fun. I was hearing a lot of really interesting things. All right, so from the people who did not do it, okay, the people who were not one of the characters, you tell me who was really good at being the unbeliever. Who was really good? I'm seeing fingers pointing at Charles. I'm seeing fingers pointing at Josh. And over here, I saw pointing at Charles first. Charles, would you be willing to be in character up front again? Yes? All right, bring it on. Bring it on up. All right. Okay. Tables, you tell me, who did a really good job being the Christian? I'm seeing from the same table. I kind of want to get someone from a different table. Who is really good at being the Christian? I'm hearing here. And I'm hearing here. You were the first one. Would you like to engage from up front? All right, bring it up. And what's your name? Mike. All right. All right, why don't you guys give Charles and Mike a hand for coming on up here. So we're doing something I don't think we've ever done in midweek before. We're handing the mics over to you guys, and we don't know what's going to happen. So for about 10 minutes or so, we're going to hand it over to you guys, and you guys are going to be these characters. So whenever you're ready, Charles, you go ahead and take it away and talk right into your mic. Yep. It's working.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Whenever
Check
you're ready.
1, 2. Okay. Hey, man, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
You're looking good. You're looking. Hey, have you heard that Florida is trying to legalize cannabis, recreational cannabis, so we can all enjoy it? I'm just trying to get a few signatures out here. Could you help me? Help all these other folks out here who want to enjoy a little bit of cannabis. Can you help me out and sign this?
Well, I can talk about it with you if you like.
Oh, that's great. What do you want to know? What do you want to know?
What's your name first?
I'm Charles. Charles, how's it going?
Charles, do you use the cannabis yourself?
Yeah. This morning. It's great. It's perfect. It's perfect. You should know.
Are you stoned now?
What is stone? No. I am enjoying something that you should be able to enjoy, so that all these people out here should be able to enjoy.
What will it do for me, do you think?
Make you feel great. It will just enlighten your mind. It'll make things so much easier to see. So much.
Well, have you been using it a long time yourself?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I think the enjoyment has been so great. It seemed like a lifetime. But probably hasn't been that long. No.
Did you try something before the cannabis?
I tried something before the cannabis.
You said it makes you happy.
Oh, yes, it makes me
Was there something
happy.
that made you happy before that?
There was coffee. There was coffee.
Well, I think probably coffee is a little better for you.
You think? No, you know. My doctor said that my heart was just racing, and he said I needed to get off it. But that we need something in our life, right? We need something, and this just made me feel better. It just made me feel better.
Okay. Well, I don't think I can sign it for you, but I think I can.
Super
But
easy.
I can help you. You asked me to
You
kind of help you
You
out.
direct me to some other people who can
You
sign
asked
it.
if I could help you out.
Absolutely.
Okay. You also said that the coffee made your heart race.
Oh yes. Did.
Can I suggest something that'll
did.
help your heart also?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Sure, go
It
ahead.
won't be cannabis,
Cannabis.
and it won't be something you put into your body.
No. This is New Age stuff.
Well,
I would accept it. I've heard the New Age
it
people.
might be-
They look really good.
it might be new to you, but it's
Might be
not
new
new
to
age.
me. Okay.
Have you ever been involved with any religions of any kind?
I've heard a lot of religions, a little bit here, a little bit there. They all seem like they got something good going on. Some things that don't seem so good, but they all seem like they got some good going on. And I think it would be even any of them would be even better with a little acceptance of some cannabis, and they just even if you didn't personally think that cannabis was great, what's to say you standing in front of the way of all these other folks who could enjoy it? They might be a little apprehensive to try it if it would just legalize and someone could say, it's okay. It's okay. We're not going to judge you for it.
Well, I'm not saying that someone could judge me for it.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to be happy, why do I need to put something inside my body?
Well, you don't have to. You don't have to. I'm just saying, why would you stand in the way of someone else that might make them happy?
Well, I think everybody has the right to do certain things.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make it good for them.
Well,
For example, why would I put a thief in my mouth to steal my brain?
a thief in your mouth
To steal my
to
brain.
steal your brain. I don't know that you could get a thief in your mouth, sir.
Well,
I mean, I'm
The
pretty
cannabis.
pretty small. And I'm not fitting. I
I'm
can't fit
talking
in
about the
there.
cannabis.
The cannabis. The cannabis isn't trying to steal. It's trying to give you something, sir.
What's it going to give me?
Gonna give you some good feelings. You can feel good about making it right for everybody else out here. There's plenty of scientists, thousands of doctors that have said it's beneficial in different ways. Why not be able to enjoy it without a doctor's note?
Well, would you be willing to consider something else?
Consider something. Sure. What you got? What you got?
Okay.
What you got?
Now, I'm a Christian. Do you know what that means?
Christian. You do a church. You
I do church,
You go to the
yes.
building. Yeah, I've been to a church a few times. I've heard some stuff.
Okay.
Heard some stuff, some commandments.
Okay.
I think I heard, and God loving everybody.
Okay.
Which is good. That's good. That's
What
good.
does that mean to you?
With God loving everybody, I think that means He loves us.
Does He love
He
you?
loves sure.
How do you
He
know?
loves you. I heard somebody say it. They seem pretty sincere.
They said that God loved you?
Yeah, that's what the preacher said.
Okay. Well, the preacher was right. He does love you. And He has answers for you that does not include putting something in your body that will harm your body.
Oh,
Your body was never designed by God to put that stuff in you.
well, how do you know?
Because if it was needed, He'd have put it in me.
Well, God gave us apples, I guess.
And He made the apples.
Well, He didn't put them in you, did He?
He allowed us to eat them.
Well, He made the cannabis. We could put the cannabis in us.
Well, that's true, but He also made horse manure. You don't put that in you?
Oh no, I'm not putting
I didn't think
that
so.
in there.
I didn't
No,
think so.
No.
So
No.
let me suggest this. There are things that you can do that will make you happy. Not only happy, which comes from the exterior, but things can give you joy, which is internal, not external.
Joy.
Have you ever thought about the difference between joy and happiness?
They're the same thing.
No, they aren't.
They aren't. What's the difference?
The difference is one is based on your experience externally. That's happiness, happenings. Joy comes from something inside of you that's a gift from God.
Huh. A lot of people talk about God, but I'm just trying to get signatures. I just, it's I can tell you're not quite convinced, but maybe you could just sign this and I could get on my way.
Great job, great job. Give them a round of applause, yeah. All right, Charles and Mike, so glad to have you guys. You did a great job. That was fun. Man, Charles with the accent, I was dying over here. It was so good. All right, so here's what we're going to do now. Pastor Austin and I, you can come up over here. We're now going to spend a little time, missed some slides here, making evaluations, some lessons learned. So these evaluations will come from the conversation we just saw, and then maybe some from the conversations we were hearing in the tables too. But do you want to start out with maybe something you thought that went really well in this conversation?
Charles did really. That was great. You must have encountered somebody like that before and spent quite a bit of time with them, it seems. So one of the very first things that I noticed that happened in this conversation was that you asked his name. And very often in these scenarios, we can get very one-track mind very quickly and want to dive into our arguments or even do what we're practicing here and start diving into questions. But the first question that we really should ask anybody that we engage with is, hey, what's your name? So I thought that was excellent.
That was good. That was good. And you don't need to show your hands, but I'm betting at some of the tables you didn't ask their name. So can anyone tell me what was the name of the guy, if you had a guy? Brett. We had Brett. Does anyone know what was the name of the girl if you had a girl? Ashley. Brett and Brett, that'd be hilarious. But some people are like, oh, we didn't know that. We didn't talk about the name. But this is a great point. I was so glad when he brought up the name. So that was really, really good. One thing I thought that was really good that he did, I think his initial transition was really, really well done. So Charles asked him if he'd like to sign this. And then he responded, well, I don't think I'm going to sign it, but I'd be happy to talk about it with you, right? I thought that was really good. Yeah. Anything else about the start or anything else?
No, I think that was good at the start for sure.
Yeah, so that was really, really, really good. How about, let me just ask you guys, was there anything else you saw that was really, really good about this? Yeah.
I think that, it really, the legalizing marijuana really is irrelevant, right? I mean, that's not the argument that we wanted to have. And I thought it was good that he kept not telling him why marijuana was bad, why marijuana was bad, why marijuana was bad, and why he wasn't going to sign, but why Jesus is better. Mm-hmm. I thought that was great. It took the argument out of it.
Yeah, I like that. So he wasn't making politics the point. He was trying to talk about his heart. So yeah, that was really good. So here's one thing. I know some of you at the tables might have fell into this trap. Here's a trap we fall into. We hear an issue like that, and we get stuck in the politics spiral. All right, a lot of us, we're primed and ready to argue about politics, but you might have 5 minutes with this guy, and if you just argued with politics, it was in his notes. There's nothing you can say that will convince him otherwise. There's a lot of people that way. You will not convince them against their will, especially on a political issue, right? And we're Christians, so we have our political convictions. But more important to us than whether we're right or wrong on the political issue is this guy, we're trying to find out, does this guy need to know Jesus? And if he does, how can I get the conversation there, right? And so that's danger, is getting into the politics trap. Yeah.
And related to that is the trap of trying to argue about science with people. A lot of times we get the idea that science is this enterprise that's out there that's totally objective to everybody. Science is science is science is true is true is true, and it doesn't matter what you think about it or what I think about it. Science is science, and if we can get all the scientific facts correct, then we're going to win the argument. And that's actually not the case. It's similar to the politics. If you focus on science, you're going to miss the real point, like what Mark was saying. And the thing about science is science always requires interpretation of facts. There are facts that are out there, but every single fact requires somebody looking at that fact and then interpreting the truth about it. And so science, you'll see tons of scientific articles that argue against one another, and only one person can be right. And so focusing on science, just like politics, is actually not going to get you very far down the field, because it's ultimately dependent upon that person's interpretation of the facts.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah, anything else you saw that was really good?
I think one of the most important key is listening.
Mm-hmm.
Let the other person finish what he's trying to say,
Mm-hmm.
rather than jumping in right away. It may cause some bad arguments.
That's good. That's good. So not jumping in right away, actually listening. That's a huge part of the Columbo questions, is actually listening to what they're saying and then thinking about what to ask next. Anything else you saw that you thought was really good?
I thought I saw a hand over here a second ago.
It was me, but I forgot what.
Okay. That's good. That's good. So another thing I wanted to point out. So again, someone like this is a matter of assessing the situation. I kind of said this earlier, but I want to talk about it a little more. So here you have a guy asking for petitions, signatures for cannabis. That's a sign right away, this should not be the main thing I'm talking with this guy about, right? He's very, very firm on his belief in here. And so he asked some really good questions about, did he believe in God? Had he ever been to church, right? I would have really taken the conversation in those directions in these tables and say, well, you know what's something? I might not be an expert in all the science and cannabis and all that, but here's a guy who's telling me he's only been to church a few times. So I want to ask with it, so when did you go to church? Did someone take you? There's actually, it was in the notes. If you found that out, they had some notes about their history with church. If you asked him about the religious beliefs, he asked about his religious beliefs, I would start going down that path and asking him questions there because we care about this as a person, we care about what they believe about, but at the end of the day, my main goal isn't to argue against him in cannabis in this moment. It's to talk to this person and look for a gospel opportunity in this moment, right? And so there's some other things I saw that were good there. Did you have any other thoughts?
The other thing I noticed was you were doing exactly what we were talking about by asking, well, what do you mean by that? And you could see how that just opened up the conversation just by asking over and over. You're really asking that same question. What do you mean by that? Could you explain this a little bit more? Like, where'd you get that idea from? And just by asking, it's really the same question over and over. It lets the other person talk and talk and talk and really opens the door to furthering the conversation.
Yep. And let me ask you guys this. Who had more times of being unsure what to say? It was Charles, because he was asking more questions, right? And so that was an example of he was in the driver's seat of the conversation. Charles had to think of the answer. Whoa, and then he had some amazing answers, one-liners too. But when you're the one asking the questions, you're taking the pressure off you. You have time to think. You have all of that, and he did a really great job of asking those questions.
So I'm curious, when he turned the conversation back onto you about the apples thing, well, God made apples outside of us. He made cannabis outside of us. Why can't we put that in us? How'd that sit with you? What was your initial thinking there?
Well, I didn't equate the apples to the same as cannabis. Apples can nourish you, and cannabis just makes you high. Yeah. Makes you nuts.
So you got to be quick on your feet in some sense, but you also can't get totally stumped by them throwing it back out at you. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. All right. Anything else?
Say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
When I observe, you can ask the people question is good, but don't let the people ask too much question that you lose your ground. It should be like, if I sit here and say, just go into the, the gospel, then he didn't have chance to just apple and this and go back and forth, then in the end, nothing come out.
Yeah. Yeah, Pastor Kwong was saying, don't get stuck in the arguments and the details and all that. That was good. Well, we're running out of time here, but I would love to hear one more round of applause for these two who did an amazing job. All right, guys. So last thing I'm going to say, like I said, this is a practical class. We are actually trying to take what we're learning and apply it, okay? So be praying daily. Try to meet weekly and try to share by the end of this class. And if you do those first two things, I guarantee you will all have an opportunity to share by the end of this class. So let me say a prayer and you can be dismissed. Dear Jesus, thank you so much for a fun time. Thank you for a time that might be enlightening and helpful to others. Lord, I pray that all of us would not have just gone through this for fun, but would be ready to take what we've learned to the streets. Glorify your name through us. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.